When you were a kid, you were saying you were able to look at your dad or your uncle and you could really perceive them and understand them and know them.
Yeah.
When you looked around at the people in the org and you trusted them, do you think there was a misperception there, or were you?
Well, I tell you, I got to be honest, is that the more I got in, the stupider I got. That's as I get out, that's my perception. The less, I mean, Christ, you don't even ask questions. I mean, that's what I was trying to remember the other day, that I was going to say that I had forgotten. Like this thing, I got into, they made me as commissioner of CCHR. I'm talking to Tori. And the
CCHR is?
Because Citizens Commission on Human Rights is a way to try and destroy psychiatry and psychology. And I was like, fine, I don't give a shit. And so, you know, they put my name on their stationery. Fine, they got me out of an ethics cycle or something. So I say, okay. And, but I would go, and I always had questions, you know, because I would, you know, even L. Ron Hubbard, you know, he would always call the psychs, and he would rail about them and how terrible they are, and they're the sole course of destruction. But he would never, I kept saying, you know, his own technology says that's a generalization, the psychs. Who? Psychs on the whole track. That means all psychiatrists for billions of years in the history of theta. You know, it's like, it's so general, and that would be that's a characteristic of a suppressive person, is one who speaks in generalities. And another one is somebody, a person who has overts, which are sins or crimes committed, is somebody who's, you know, antagonistic or angry. And he seemed very antagonistic and angry about sex. So I was thinking he must have, you know, overts on him, and he's speaking about him in generalities. But the thing about, I was thinking about that I went over to CCHR and got tours ad infinitum by the directors, this woman, Jan Eastgate. And I would ask questions, and she'd write me up in ethics chits and shit. And I said, fine, yeah, I got the question. I don't fucking know. But I would say, if you want me to represent Scientology's viewpoint, and if you go to their museum, it's all the psychs are bad, the psychs are bad, this is a bad thing, and Hitler, and they're responsible for child pornography and rape, and it's all the psychs. And I say, okay, that's their viewpoint. I say, but if I'm going to get into a discussion, you know, if you want to prepare me to be a spokesman for this shit, I got to know the other side. So, and I kept asking, can you give me the other side? And they won't give it to you. And every time I would push it, I'd be like, honey, there's no way to get into the argument. You know, they're not, if it's all this is true, there wouldn't be anything. I got to know their viewpoint. How am I going to win the argument? You know what I mean? And they wouldn't give me the viewpoint. And it was like, and then they started to write me up because I'm doubting. I'm not saying I'm doubting or nothing. I'm just waiting for the data, which is this whole big thing about learning how to think correctly is this other course called the Data Series. And basically you have to get all the data. They won't give you any fucking data on certain things. And especially about this. There's nothing written in all the tomes of Scientology about psychiatry. Nothing other than the psychs are responsible for all your sexual problems because they implanted you as a thetan 10 years ago. And I realized that on my research of OT10. Oh, well, then it must be true. Because LRH says it's so. I mean, it's really, you see how at a certain point you get conned. And I was saying, where's the fucking data? I'd say to everybody. And they'd show you, and nobody's allowed to tell you anything. So they pull out a reference. They always pull out this fucking reference called pain and sex. And there's like, he's talking about pain and sex are these things that are really just dogging people and bothering them. And it's a really difficult thing that we're trying to help you with in Scientology. And basically, there's maybe 2 sentences in there where LRH says, through my research on the whole track of OT something or other, I've just discovered that this is all because of psychs. And that's the reference they tell you to prove that the fucking Hitler and rape is a thing. And I'm like, honey, that doesn't quite handle it, you know, but they don't get it.
Now, I look at this as an outsider, and to me, and I don't have a vast knowledge of this, but it seems like the psychiatric field sprung forth in the 1800s, or not you know, thousands of years ago or millions of years ago. How are there psychs on the whole track?
Because
if there weren't psychs?
No, well, because now the latest, these are the evil people. These are the evil beings, actually. These are the evil beings. And they've been around, like you hear about Xenu and all that shit. Xenu was a psych. You got it?
So he just wasn't a practicing psychiatrist.
No, he was practicing Xenuism. You got it? Now they're called psychs. So you better beware.
I remember one time I visited.
Right? Fuck me.
One time I visited the Celebrity Center, and it just walked in late at night and looked around and said, "Well, what goes on in here?"
Right.
And they woke up the projectionist to show me the orientation.
Oh, nice.
I had my own private screening that night, and they had some poor Sea Org kid, maybe 15, 16 years old, babysitting me in the theater.
Right. Well, you're not allowed to watch the movie alone.
Right. Well, I was
not allowed to do what? Because you get an MU. Like he was watching to make sure you didn't have any lack of mask kind of shit.
And he was making small talk before that, and he was saying, well, you remember the Salem witch trials? Yeah. It was the psychs behind that. Well, I don't think there were psychiatrists back then. And he went, oh, no, not the psychs. I mean the pharmaceutical companies.
Oh, dear goodness.
No, not quite.
See, these are the kids. You just gotta, you dash off a get well soon card, and that's about it. Because it's sad, This is the interesting thing. And it goes back to, to answer further the question of, what did you perceive? What I perceived, and I kind of avoided the question by saying I got stupider. But let me tell you something. These are good people. These are some of the best people you can meet. These are people who really want to help. They're willing to give up their entire life and their own personal ambition to help others. That's a pretty rare, and generally you would say, it's a pretty decent person. That's the thing. And I would say I'm not a bad person, If I saw me walking around there, I'd say, okay, he's okay,
But when you say you got stupider, how do you think that happened? Well,
in my opinion, again, and I'm only out of Scientology about a year or so, less than a year, officially. But in my opinion, what I've gathered as I wake up. It's a funny thing in Scientology, you feel as though you're waking up to the truth, the reality, or what really is. But what you're doing is waking up to the reality of Scientology, which is that, not the the reality, which is the agreed upon universe of what is. And basically, in my opinion, the best thing you can be is yourself. And that's who you are. And that, there's degrees to which you can actually become yourself. And that's probably what the whole spiritual interest is. For me, I don't really know. But what Scientology, the trick of it is, it makes you feel as though you're sold that you're actually becoming yourself. But what you're actually becoming is, my name's Jason Beghe. I was becoming Jason Beghe, the Scientologist, rather than just, not even Jason Beghe, but me. And the trick is, and you say, how do you fall for this shit? Go back to my first fucking win. Because it's me. It's me. And so there is you. But then it's you are through, I can't explain it, pressure of the group, or this is the thing I'm trying to get. Because I've never been like a guy, well, I got to get a pair of those shoes because everybody's wearing them. It's not been, I've been always, I got to find my own if everybody's wearing those things. But it's like, and maybe that's how I got out to some degree, is that I always try, I'm not saying I had never, bought a BMW or whatever the fuck people want to do, but it's like, to me, it gives you a way of thinking that, at least for me and from what I observe of others, is not native to that person. I think, as I said before, in my opinion, I suspect, I'm no Dalai Lama, but I think that the best thing you can be is yourself. And that if you can do that truthfully, it'll be beautiful and successful and interesting. I don't know about success, like how you define it, but it'll be a worthwhile time spent. And what happens is you are sold, and again, the trap is good because you sell it to yourself. Because if you're not on course, you're wanting to be on course, or you should be on course. You've got your own self in jail. It's an autopilot gig. It's quite good. I think there's some hypnotism in there or something. I don't quite know, but it's quite surprising. And so at the end of the thing, you end up being, like here's an example. You start the ethics technology. So you start thinking, okay, and you start thinking in terms of the conditions of existence that he laid out, and that these are behaviors. And so now you're not just going, you know what the fuck, I think I need to take a walk, and I think I got to become, I'm going to be an insurance salesman, and that's my truth. It's, you have to go through these steps and do this. It's like retarded. It's not true. It's not true. And I did ethics cycles and conditions, and nothing changed. I've seen people who've done them and they've changed. So I don't know, whatever. But there's a placebo effect. I don't quite know. Tori, how many times did you do the PTSSP course?
It's like on and on and on.
You have to, every time you go PTS, which is the human condition, you got to do the course over and do this shit. Let me tell you something. That's another racket, PTS.
I'm not sure if we got PTS description on
PTS
camera.
is potential trouble source. So all injury, accident, and illness. Listen to those three words. All injury, accident, illness. Ow, oh, is all because of PTS. Everything negative that happens is because of PTS, which means you are a P potential T trouble S source. Wow, that sounds weird, a potential trouble source. So in other words, not only did you just slip and split your lip, but you better get away from this guy, because if you're near him, you're going to split your lip too, and your business is going to fail. He's a potential trouble source. So you got to take him out. It's like he's got, it's like you don't come to school with the flu. This is like the spiritual flu. So it's like heavy shit. And now there's only one reason that you are a potential trouble source. One reason is that you're connected to an SP, which is a suppressive person. Now this is the 2.5% of awful people like Tori who are fucking it up for the rest of us, good people. And oh, it's a funny thing. It's funny. As I zip around, my best friend, this is my best friend. I mean, like, this is a guy that I was, in 9th grade, I met this guy. And like, I saw this guy, came to my school in 9th grade, and I saw this guy, and I was a gregarious kind of kid, and he was new, and I saw him, and I said, you know something? You and I are gonna be friends. I think that's the first thing I ever said to him. And I was right. He's a big famous actor now. And an amazing guy, David Duchovny. And David, my best friend, I mean, I'm talking about a friend, our relationship was adversely affected by my being in Scientology. He was very cool, but he wasn't into it. He was happy for me. He never gave me any fucking thing about it, But, and I think his wife you know, I perceived that, you know, she was a little bit more like that. At any rate, and they were right. But, you know, and then everybody in Scientology, not everybody, so that's a generalization. I'll give you people. Marty Rathbun, Susan Watson, Dave Pettit, a couple of RTC terminals people said, well, he's a 1-1 SP. Okay? In other words, trying to destroy my relationship with him, and it affected our relationship. 1-1 is a definition is covertly hostile. Hey man, I'm your friend. I really am. You fuck. You know, that's covertly hospital. And so one of the first things I did, I mean, you know, we'd stay in communication, but the further I got in, like that, and that's a loss, you know, let alone my family. You know, no, but my family, you know, shit, they don't fuck with me or anything, you know, but I've never been closer now that I'm out, you know, because they weren't into it. Everybody was totally respectful of me. Nobody ever said, you know, my mother said one thing once, you know, I just don't think it, you know, allows for the grace of God or something. That was the all, something, you know, because she's a big Christian thing. Of course, I whipped out the whiz book and I gave her the right answer and handled her, you know. But the thing with Dave, this is just the other thing when I was thinking about I was laughing is as I got out, when I got out, one of the first people I went to go see was David. And, you know, his whole family was out of town, and I was just moving here, and now we live in the same city. And so I went over to his house, and, you know, we're just walking around, and we talked about it a little bit, just a little bit, you know, because I just said, oh, by the way. I said, oh, okay. So we started to talk a little bit about, like, you know, OT levels and stuff like that, you know. And, you know, he doesn't watch South Park or whatever the fuck, but, you know, he doesn't know this whole... So, you know, what is that? You know, what is the, you know, what were you into? Why, what is the OT? Or, you know, or so, I don't know what, if he asked a question, but somehow I went and I explained to him. And here I am, you know, just kind of basically, it just walked out the door. And it did so much for me, but I started to explain to him the story of Xenu and the loyal officers. And I tell you, fuck me. I mean, I couldn't get a third of the way through the story, and we had our faces on the floor. We were laughing so hard. I mean, you couldn't even talk. It was just, because it's retarded. It's insane.
What was your reaction, though, when you saw the packet with the info? How did you react?
Well, that's the other thing I got to say. I mean, like I had told you earlier, I had been on a spiritual journey long before Scientology. This data is just, it's as different as the word Thetan is different from the word spirit. It's about that different. I mean, the Bible talks about the devil and demons. It's nomenclature. The, you know, entities is what they talk about in these New Age religions. So all that stuff about Thetans, I mean, it was a little because I was in Scientology heavily, so I was a little bit like this. But I thought, okay, and I remember that was my thought. I said, okay, well, that's obviously, it wasn't that big of a surprise to me. And I just thought, it's like one of those moments, now that I look back and really look at it, there was a moment where I could have woken up there. But you choose not to. And that's part of the reason why Scientology is expensive. You know. Well, if you're paying a lot of money for it, it makes it more valuable. And you give it more. It's like I was just listening to the fucking radio today. There's this guy. He was working at MTV. And they were in New York. This is just on NPR today. This guy, and he was on this art channel on NPR. And he was working at MTV, and they were talking about packaging and marketing. and how important it is. And the guy, and he was talking and saying it was important and that it was, this other guy said, it's not that important. He says, bullshit. And they had a little bit of an argument, and he said, well, let me see, let me show you something. And he went, and he was in New York, and he went and he grabbed little garbage, and he put them in little plastic boxes, and he put a little stamp on them and dated them and signed the, you know, and numbered them, and he's selling them for $50 each as art. Started as $10 as just, and it was like a little gift. But now that they're up there $50 and $100 each, the people are actually calling them art. So it's an interesting thing. So again, it's your own, you're driving the car. It's just that you don't realize that the car, as a Scientologist, because you're in the trap, it's got a pre-rigged route. It's called the bridge. And so you feel like this is this easy life. I just got to sit here and the car basically drives itself. All I got to do is show up at the church and I'll be happy.